My name is Navin. I was diagnosed with pulmonary embolism. So initially they said it's fine. I just had to go on a couple of weeks of medication and then it'll be good. But after 6 months, we realized that the condition was getting worse. The next thing we knew is that the doctors start telling us, okay, this is going to be the timeline. You're going to have a year to live, at most. It was like a death sentence. I went to the temples. I even went to the mosque. Anything that could help. They rushed me into ICU. The only way that I could, come out of this is that if I were to go into operation now and then they slice open and get the fluids out. But the doctor said that to do all that, it was too risky and it'll take a long time. So what he did was he just ripped open my shirt and then he estimated the distance between my heart and this pericardium sac where the whole fluid was built up. He immediately just took his medical instrument and punctured through. At that moment, I felt like I stepped out of my body into a different realm. It's being caught up. That's the best word that I can use to describe that. Caught up into a different realm. And then as I was moving in this different atmosphere, there was this bright light, huge bright light. And in front of this light stood Christ. It was as if you're standing there in all His glory, in this very merciful, blissful manner, so calm. I mean, the emotions that I have now as a human being, embodied, was the same emotions that I had at that point in time when I saw Christ. So that's why I'm so moved by how He actually was with me. He is that abundance of love. My dad passed away in 2007 because of a heart attack, and he was standing right next to Christ. I looked at my dad, and then I looked at Christ, and then I said, "My Father." He extended His right hand to me, and I felt myself going back into my body.
Reached the ICU room. It was the first room on the left, and the room was a mess, right? You see so much blood all over, you've got tissue all over on the floor, and I see my husband lying on the bed, and I thought he had gone for a leg surgery, right? So he didn't look like he went for just a leg surgery. And he's trying to speak to me, and at that point in time, he's still not fully conscious about what just happened. And the doctor takes me to the side and explains to me that they need to incubate him. And I wouldn't be able to speak to him for the next couple of days. So they incubated him. They connected many machines around him. They start to puncture around his neck, make entries for them to have access into him. And our lives just changed.
A couple of days later, I regained consciousness, and then I told my wife I couldn't speak. I was incubated before that, so I had tubes running down my throat. So I just took a piece of paper and I wrote, "Saw Jesus."
It was a surprise, but I was pleased that my husband wasn't alone when he went through that moment.
And I was just confused. I couldn't understand why did I call Christ my Father. It's as if I knew Him as my Father all along, and I just called Him that. I started to follow all the other religions as well, just to understand, and then I realized that the only religion, right, that acknowledged Christ as my Father is Christianity. What I experienced, at that point, and I was just sitting down in the room. I remember when I opened my eyes, I was just thinking to myself, what do I do now? So one night I was sleeping and I had this calling from outside of my room. My oxygen tank, the tube was short, so I couldn't actually go out. And the doctor said that if I took out the oxygen tank and walked, I would have collapsed, and it would have been worse. The calling was so strong. So I walked out up to the limit of my tube, opened the door, and I saw a figure sitting in my hall. It's quite far away. And I said, Lord, if this is you, I trust you. I've seen you, and I'm going to come to you now. So I took off the oxygen tank and I walked towards. And next thing I know, I turned back. I was so far away from my room and I was breathing fine. So that night, I slept without the oxygen tank. And the next day, I got up and went and have breakfast with my family. They were shocked. They were like, what are you doing? The doctor said you're going to collapse. I said, no, man, listen, I'm fine. Came through again. Who is Jesus? Simple question, right? Who is Jesus? The experience that I had with Christ when I actually met Him face to face was an experience with a God that was gracious, merciful more than anything else, and that atmosphere was an atmosphere of peace and bliss. So when I speak to someone about God and about Christ, and the moment they don't give me that part of representation, then it becomes difficult for me to accept it. The good thing is, you have access to the internet and all that. So, but that made it even more confusing for someone who has no experience at all. And there were times where I would just park my car at the side of the road and just cry out to God and say, Lord, I've seen you, but now I just don't know who you are. I can't understand you. I used to go for courses, but it wasn't enough. I just wanted maybe a simple explanation of who He was. And I was thinking to myself, that's great. This guy looks like he knows his stuff. So I'm going to try to go and speak to him and ask him about Christ and who Christ is, and tell me about Christianity. He was rushing off somewhere. I said, hey pastor, how are you? And he says, hi, with his big smile, and he was so warm. And I said, pastor, so could you tell me about your church? Which church do you go to? He said, as a matter of fact, I'm going for service now. He says, why don't you come along to my church? I was like, yeah, why not? Quietly just walked in, and everyone was so warm. I remember everyone was so, welcome to church. And I just sat at the back, and the next thing I know, I was just looking around and I saw all these people just worshiping the Lord and having tears down their eyes and just singing and on their knees and all. I said, Lord, this is what I was fighting for. Just for me to be in this atmosphere, to soak in the presence of the Lord was so real. It was so tangible. I can remember, I just told my wife, I said, I felt He was just standing next to me. And everyone else felt the same. I mean, He's not exclusive. That's the most important thing to realize, I guess, when we're in that atmosphere. And that's it. I told my wife, I think I found my church. He is indeed the one true God. And He is not a discriminator of race, religion, faith, skin color, anything of that sort. Anybody can believe in him. I mean, he died for the whole world, and the whole world didn't know who he was at that stage. The fact that I met him at that point of my life just tells me that he is that merciful and gracious God that the whole world is looking for to fit into any point of their life.